And because of this, we have a problem of identification. We do not know whom we are.
Bless up for gracing our channel with your presence. We are happy to have you here. Now we're going to get into today's video. It is part 2 of the Walter Rodney riots that happened in Jamaica. It took us a while to get here, but here we are doing the second video as promised. You can check out the very first video to get the back info on what we're speaking about. Now, as we mentioned, Walter Rodney is considered to be one of Africa's greatest scholars, a classic example of one who came and fulfilled his purpose. He is said to be a great man, someone who stood up and fought for our people. And his books, one being How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, is said to be one of the most important books ever written. So give it a read if you can. Now we're going to continue to see what happened to him in Jamaica. So as we mentioned, he was a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, and he had to go to Canada for a Black Writers Conference. So he went to Canada, and upon returning on October 15th, the Jamaican government declared Rodney persona non grata on grounds of sedition and refused to allow him to re-enter the island, so leaving his family stranded in Kingston. Now, early on, October 16, the students marched in protest. So they heard what happened and they decided to march against this. So they started the demonstration under the leadership of the Guild of undergraduates, closing down the campus. They then proceeded to march first to the Prime Minister's residence and then to the Parliament building in Kingston. On the way, many more demonstrators joined in, and eventually the disturbance became increasingly violent, spreading across the city. Eventually, several people were killed, and there were millions of dollars in property damages. The riots were a part of an emerging Black consciousness movement in the Caribbean and helped inspire the 1970 Black Power Revolution in Trinidad and Tobago. The riots were violent, intense, not just had protesting and, fighting and marching, but also looting, and even got one great Jamaican caught up in it. Now, you know of Bob Marley of the Wailers, and many of you have heard of Peter Tosh, but you probably haven't heard of this. Seemingly, it's a fact about Peter Tosh. He was young, militant, and said to be impulsive. Peter Tosh was said to be one of the most serious of them all. He was all about Black empowerment, militants, and he wasn't afraid to rebel. So he heard of what happened and he decided to join them. So he took a bus with some volunteers and they looted a company because that was part of the protest as well. It is reported that Peter Tosh then had to fled to the country to avoid being arrested, but he didn't lay low. Peter Tosh is quite the force. Now, according to an article on ua.edu, they're saying that the students, when they march in protest, assertive police response at various points along the march and an overwhelming incursion of non-students sent the UE marchers back to the Mono campus, where the security forces corralled them for several days until they agreed to return to classes. The exhibition covered the long years of student protests at UA, a tradition that dates back at least to 1960, where there was a protest over both local and international issues. Students in the Mercy Cole Hall took all issues into the public eye, and just weeks later were among students and faculty on the streets of Kingston protesting the Sharpeville massacre in South Africa, Sharpeville. These activities became a staple of the 1960s and were increasingly informed by international as well as local conditions, spurring the banning of intellectuals in the Caribbean and civil rights, race, race consciousness, and other socio-political struggles in North America and beyond. Now, the 1968 Rodney related student protests and related riots were also in keeping with student and student/worker protests across the world during 1968. So we're just giving you bits of history right here, hopefully to spark your interest so that you can do further reading, because there's much to cover about these riots that happened. Now, it's also important to note that the riots, which began on the 16th of October 1968, triggered an increase in political awareness across the Caribbean, especially among the Afrocentric Rastafarian sector of Jamaica, which is documented in Rodney's book, The Groundings with My Brothers, published by Bogle Lovater Publications in 1969. So, what happened to Rodney after all that, right? In 1969, he returned to the University of Dar es Salaam. He was promoted to senior lecturer there in 1971 and promoted to associate professor in 1973. He worked at the university until 1974, when he returned to Guyana. He was promised a professorship at the University of Georgetown in Guyana, but the Forbes Burnham government rescinded the offer when Rodney arrived in Guyana. Wow. He was still pretty young. He's done and been through a lot. Now, Rodney became a prominent Pan-Africanist and Marxist and was important, as we mentioned, in the Black Power movement in the Caribbean and North America. While living in Dar es Salaam, he was influential in developing a new center of African learning and discussion. Reading about him, I'm reminded of our very own Marcus Garvey. Now, there's much to say about all of that. We're going to wrap up though and speak about what shocked us the most as it relates to this prominent Pan Africanist and person. No, Rodney was just 38 years old when this happened. On the 13th of June 1980, a bomb explosion in his car caused his death. And that was a month after he returned from celebrations of independence in Zimbabwe at a time of intense political activism. Wow, that's really heartbreaking. Whenever we're covering history and we're reading about people who really stand up to make a change, something happens, right? A few do make it into old age, but many of them don't. It's really sad. But that's why we should continue remembering them and celebrating them and promoting them and continuing what they stood for, that their work will not be in vain. Now, Rodney was survived by his wife, Patricia, and three children. His brother, Donald Rodney, who was injured in the explosion, said that a sergeant in the Guyana Defense Force and a member of the House of Israel named Gregory Smith had given Walter the bomb that killed him. After the killing, Smith fled to French Guiana, where he died in 2002. It is widely believed, though not proven, that the assassination was set up by Guyana's president, who was Lyndon Forbes Burnham. Rodney believed that the various ethnic groups historically disenfranchised by the ruling colonial class should work together, a position that challenged Burnham's hold on power. Now, Donald Rodney, Walter's brother, who was in the car with him during the time of the assassination and was convicted in 1982 of possessing explosive in connection with the incident that killed his brother. On 14th of April 2021, the Guyana Court of Appeals overturned this judgment and Donald's sentence, exonerating him after 40 years in which he contested his conviction. On the 9th of August 2021, the National Assembly of Guyana voted to adopt Resolution number 23 to implement the 2016 findings of the Commission of Inquiry appointed to inquire and report on the circumstances surrounding the death in an explosion of the late Dr. Walter Rodney on the 13th of June 1980 at Georgetown. Rodney's influence and his work continued beyond his 38 years that he had on this earth. His death was commemorated in a poem by Martin Carter entitled For Walter Rodney by the dub point Linton Quiswe Johnson in Reggae for Rodney and by Camus Bathwaite in his Poem for Walter Rodney. David Diadine also wrote a poem on Rodney in his 1988 collection, Cooley Audacity. In 1977, the African Studies Center at Boston University inaugurated the Walter Rodney Lecture Series. In 1982, the American Historical Association awarded Walter Rodney the Albert J. Beveridge Award for a history of the Guyanese working people, 1881 to 1905. In 1984, the Center for Caribbean Studies at the University of Warwick established the Walter Rodney Memorial Lecture in recognition of the life and work of one of the most outstanding scholar activists of the Black diaspora in the post-World War II era. In 1993, the Guyanese government awarded Walter Rodney Guyana's highest honor, the Honor of Excellence of Guyana. The Guyanese government also established the Walter Rodney Chair in History at the University of Guyana. In 1998, the Institute of Caribbean Studies at the University of West Indies inaugurated the Walter Rodney Lecture Series. In 2004, Rodney's widow, Patricia, and his children donated his papers to the Robert L. Woodruff Library of the Atlanta University Center. And also, since since 2004, there's an annual Walter Rodney Symposium that has been held each 23rd of March, which is Rodney's birthday, at the center under the sponsorship of the library and the Political Science Department of Clark Atlanta University, and under the patronage of Rodney's family. And he has gotten awards in 2005, 6, 10, 2012, and recently 2023. Savvy Contemporary and Independent Art Space in Berlin, Germany, dedicated a research, performance, and exhibition project titled To Walter Rodney, 50 years after the publication of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, a book I think we all need to read. Alright, guys, that's it. That's our wrap up on Walter Rodney. I'm just sharing a bit of what happened, but there's so much more to this man's life that you can learn about. This is just one of the videos honoring his work and telling a bit of his story, and just bigging him up for what he did. Alright, so we hope you found value in this video. Thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, comment. We're looking forward to your feedback. We have so much more coming your way, and in the future, I'm sure we'll do more work on Walter Rodney and even better video of this great thinker and achiever. Alright, guys. Bless up always. Take care of yourself and each other. And don't be afraid to stand up for something, no matter how small or how big, because it's everyday people like you and me who can make changes in the most impactful way for those who really need it, including ourselves. Alright, guys. Take care of yourself. Until next time.